All right, I think we're going to dive in and get started. We're going to start by playing the game of life. It's not very hard to play. Young people, if you'll turn to the back of the page I asked you to work on, there's 4 dashes there next to the game of life. And parents, if you would take your packet, turn it over to the actual front, and then turn to the first white page in there. We're going to play the game of life. At the top, you guys have 4 dashes. Lane, you just saw this Friday, so I don't want you cheating. You have to pick 4 numbers randomly also. But what I'd like you to do to play the game of life, you put down 4 numbers between 1 and 63. And it's really not that big a deal. You're just choosing the fate of the rest of your life. All right, so 4 numbers to choose the fate of the rest of your life. All right. So how you play the game of life is that this is the game of life board, and you match up the numbers you chose with the board. So if you happen to have written down the number 4, you will spend a good portion of your life cheating others. All right. So if everybody would kind of just jot down what theirs are, we're going to share them and just see what kind of life fate has handed you. Right, because sometimes I forget. My name's Jason. I'm the director of the program, and I didn't have to do this. So I'm going to pass it over here and ask you to tell us your name and then what life or fate has handed you.
My name's Daniel, and I'm going to start with number 4 because I do have number 4. So cheat others, be honest, okay. Criminal, number 29, fight for peace, 22.
All right. That is an interesting life. Where are you going to be fighting for peace for? In jail? Is that a life you want to live? All right, we'll do
At least 2 of the 4, and probably 3 of the 4.
Yeah.
One is certainly something. But
all right. Tell us your name and what life has handed you. So it's really hard to believe any of the previous ones, right? Is that a life you want to live, Hudson? All right, good. Next.
My name's Nate. Be honest, get rejected, learn, and also like impulsively.
Again, I don't know whether to believe you or not. I'm an honest person, right? Yeah, that's a tough one. I put you in a conundrum. Is it a life you want to live?
Probably not.
Okay, good.
So no, I don't.
Okay. I'm just trying how you figure out how you get fired from prison. You know,
I
like,
learned in between there.
okay. Fair enough. At least it goes together, right? You know, at least it's a coherent story. Just gonna kind of assume you don't want many of those. All right.
My name's Sarah, and I got unemployment.
Wow, that's a tough list. Is that a list you want? Is that a life you want to live? Okay, great. Lainey.
I'm Lady. I got wealthy, hate my job, which I don't know how I picked that one again. I picked that one on Friday, so I don't know how I got that one. Become lazy and
All right. Well,
I take
I know at least some of those aren't true. You've never been lazy.
Yep, I'm Gretchen, and I got angry, love others, graduate high school, and travel. I mean, it's not too bad.
Okay.
We could do worse.
All right. Just trying to. What were the first two?
Angry and love others.
Yeah.
I mean, those are a little.
Yeah, those
Maybe
are.
I'm like angry and making sure everyone's taken care of really well. Right.
Yeah. All right. And brave. Okay. Is that a life you want to live? Good. Good. Sir.
I'm Justin. I got go to prison, strong start, become a Scrooge, be grumpy, and love others.
I don't know that you want to claim to be loving others at prison.
Grumpy.
You are grumpy about it. All right. Well, this is, just a fun way to recognize, you know what? Every one of us gets handed something in our lives. Some things we had no control over whatsoever, right? So I've been wearing glasses since I was 4. I'm ADHD. Junior high I was short. Some people get handed anxiety or depression. They get handed where they live. They get handed their biological parents. We all get handed things in our life. And so one of the goals of the program is to just help you deal with the things you had no control over, that you just have handed to you. And so that's one of the goals of the program. A couple of other goals I'd like to set up with this video. I'm going to make sure I have sound.
When I was younger, I had this feeling that there was this handbook that I'd never gotten that explained how to be, how to laugh, what to wear, how to stand by yourself in a hallway. Everyone else looked so natural, like they'd all practiced together and knew exactly what to do, even just the way that they'd push the hair out of their face. My experience was pretty much the opposite. I was conscious of how I sat, how I smiled, and when I was alone with another person, I had no idea what to do or what to say. I could just feel myself panic. It sucked. I'd imagine what people were like when I wasn't around, how they'd compare notes on how I didn't quite fit, or even worse, maybe they just wouldn't notice. So I tried to pick up the patterns. I wore what they wore and said what they said. I even wrote "smile more" on a sticky note. And over time, it sort of worked in a way. I made a version of me that fit in, whatever that means. But as I grew older, the patterns kept changing, and it took so much effort to keep learning them. And I was still stuck with the problem that I'd started with, being terrified of the moment when my tricks stopped working. I think it took me too long to learn something, that even though there is a thing called fitting in, that it's something that you can learn and practice. Those pages are so thin compared to who you are, that the way to become natural, like I wanted to be so badly, is by forgetting what you're trying to be to other people. And if there is a handbook, you probably get to write it yourself.
So I'd like to think one of our goals is to just have you all feel natural in your own skin. And we don't quite write your handbook for you, but we give you the binder with all the skills in it. And we want to talk a little bit, because sometimes we are writing our own handbook or narrative in our head based on things we had no control over, right? And so I think back to junior high, and again, I was short, I was in glasses, and the narrative in my head, the story going on was that there's just no way girls can like you, right? It's just not going to happen. And I can remember going to dances, and I had somebody dancing with me the whole night, and literally embarrassed, thinking, you know what, they can look right over my head this whole time that they're dancing with me. So that was the story I was telling myself in my head. What if the story I'd been telling myself is that these girls want to be dancing with me, right? And same exact facts, nothing changed, but that was the story I was telling myself. And if you watch me, I kind of took your little scenarios and made up like ways that maybe they could exist or something like that. Because again, we do that. We make up stories in our head see if this is going to move forward for me. And what we'd like to do, and another goal of the group, is to help you create your own story, whatever that is, feeling natural in your skin, able to cope with what you've got. And so if you notice underneath the first 4 dashes, there's another set of dashes that say story of your life. So the board has not changed at all except for the title. What I'd like is for everyone to pick out 4 things that would actually add up to a life you want to live. So if you pick out 4 things from the list that would add up to a life you want to live. This is where you got to scratch out your birth. So it's interesting. It always takes longer when you have to choose as opposed to just randomly picking numbers. I like to think about that. Sometimes we just do whatever our friends say to do or whatever. And it's different to pick out and make choices and pick from a list kind of thing and choose things. So would like Hudson to start for us. Would you share what 4 things would add up to a life you would like to live?
I did travel. So,
Sounds like a great list. Nathan.
I said love, get married, be happy, and be wealthy.
Love that you put love before get married. It's a good order for them to go in. Caitlin, would you share? Awesome. It sounds like a good life. Hudson. And wealthy? Yeah. May as well capstone that, right? It sounds like a good list too. So we use a model called DNAV, and it stands for Discoverer, Noticer, Advisor, and Valuer. And the Valuer is about finding things that are important to you. All right? That are meaningful to you, that you want to do, that you want to participate in, and are important. And Hudson, I can't pick out 4 things and just say, you know what, this is going to give you a meaningful life. I can help you figure those out, but I can't pick them for you. And that's one of the challenges, is that we want you to find those things, and we spend some effort doing that. And in a small way, each one of you have picked out 4 things that matter to you, that are important to you, that move you towards strengthening your value. Because if you have things that matter, your values influence your behavior. All right. And so I want to look at that. So if you don't have things that matter to you, you can start looking like, impulsive behaviors, risky. You get so bored that you're just going to try anything out there to see if you can get that dopamine hit, that pleasure sensation. Drugs and alcohol are kind of a fake way to get that pleasure sensation. And if you get to a point where you just don't care about yourself in any way, shape, or form, it's really easy to try suicidal and non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors. All right. And so as you find things that matter to you and you move towards them, it becomes easier to manage your thoughts and behaviors. Stress, control impulses, motivation, and perseverance also come when you're doing things that matter to you. All right. And so we spend quite a bit of time on your values and helping you find them, because again, I can't give them to you. So what I'd like is if the young people would take your binder and turn it over to the back. You have a list of domains, and if parents physically, you just take your packet and you turn it over to the back. You have the same exact list the young people do. And young people, you can pull the sheet of paper out, you can scratch on it, your binder, you can, draw through the plastic if you want. I would like each of the young people to pick out at least one value from each of the 4 domains that already matter to you. So pick out one from each. You can pick more, but I want you to pick one from each. And parents, I'd like you guys to think about your families and pick out 3 or 4 from the whole list that are important to your family, that you want to be important to your family. All right. So young people picking out a value from each of the domains for themselves, and parents picking out 3 or 4 values that they want to matter to their family, even if it's hard right now. As you get finished with that, you can keep going if you need to. Would love in your family groups just to share, parents to share the 3 or 4 family values and why they're important, and then the young people to share the values that they chose from each domain. Okay? And so just in your family group, Lainey gets me to be her family group. So okay. I think it's good. Sure.
Okay. It was new and
Let's have some values. And I'm not limited, but have as many as you want. Fair enough. I only try and limit you by for conversations, so not for life's sake. So again, the valuer is about what's important to you. it's also like, what are you already good at? What do you have strengths in? And I like to talk about those kind of on day one, because so frequently when we're struggling in life or we're trying to do some change or something, we like white knuckle it and we just like, I can get there. I can get to school and then it's hard. It's super hard. Or I can stop whatever I'm thinking about and it's really, really hard. It's much easier to be like, you know what? I'm already good at this thing, this strength. I have this strength in me. And using that to lean into some, we would say, new skills. And that's what we're here to train and teach you guys. But lean into some new skills. And so I asked the young people to each write down on that sheet, the beginning on the front page, 3 strengths that they saw that they think they have. Now, in the first one I gave you, Nathan, to your right. Yeah. And then I gave the parents a whole list, because sometimes it's hard for parents to think of things. And so gave them a whole list. It's on the back of your guys' packet. And would just like, again, in your family groups, to, you know, the young person to share the 3 strengths they wrote down, and parents to share at least the top 5 strengths you see in your young person. All right. So again, your family group, share those.
You wanna go first? Actually,
Yes.
before we give our
Score yourself a lot.
Give my life. Well, I checked last week and for time, but well, increasing. So the ticket, but also personally, my father's is appreciating you. I don't say it. You can tell that it's right. And she art music, like. Maybe not music, but you appreciate art music.
I'm noticing.
You're careful. Or careful. Working papers. You're funny. As regents. You're really kind and you're really good at seeing things.
Leadership on that.
We agree with those.
Yeah.
Good. One thing that happened. I didn't see on here, is that we're also good to know smart.
Best team players, but I'm good.
I didn't see that here.
At a team.
Things
What are some streaks you've got?
Yeah.
Those are great.
Are they true? Yeah. All right. Good. Would you accept the ones your mom's? They're hard. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's a strength you see it yourself. It's easy.
It's a big responsibility. Yeah.
It's not something I try to get from everyone. So you see. Did you accept what your dad saw in you? So what's one of your strengths? Yeah. You pick creativity today. I'm gonna have to give you some practice.
Right. Put you to work. That's right.
Did you see? Did you accept the strengths your parents see in you? Oh, good. Good. All right. So again, we use a model called DNAV. D stands for discoverer, N for noticer, A for advisor, and V for valuer. And the valuer is like finding things that matter to you and then using your strengths to kind of move in that direction. And so with that, I'm going to shift on you a little bit into the advisor. And we're going to do a little exercise. The advisor is that voice we all have in our head. So that inner voice that we all have. And all you need to know to do this exercise is that your advisor is connected to your amygdala. All right. And so right now I'm going to set a timer for 35 seconds. We're just going to sit here in silence and see if you can notice your thoughts. You can count them on your finger. You can put a mark down. You can just pay attention. I just want to see if you can notice your own thoughts while we sit here in silence. All right. On your mark, get set, think. All right, finish up that last thought. So if you remember, I shared that that voice in our head is attached to our amygdala. Our amygdala is a part of our brain that when we feel threatened, makes us lean into either running away, so flight, or fighting. It gets us ready to fight. So our amygdala is part of our biological system. And what that means is that that voice in your head is connected to your biological system. And that means you cannot control every thought that pops into your head. And you can't just say, I'm never going to think that again, because you don't have control over that. All right. I want to share a young lady that was in this group, and we do this activity in group, and she was struggling with pretty severe depression. So she was flat most of the time. On the day we did this exercise, she came in a really good mood. And that's important to know because the first three things she wrote down were, I like to go shopping. If I'm shopping, I really like the Disney store. Oh, you know what? And that reminds me of the great vacation, family vacation my family took to Disney World. All right. In group, we do this activity for 2 minutes. I don't know when she finished her list, but the last three things that she wrote down were, I don't fit in anywhere. No one loves me. Everyone would be better off if I were dead. I'll tell you, I no longer wonder when a young person tells me they struggle going to sleep at night. Because what would it, I mean, you lay down in silence and in your own thoughts, and it's possible that it could go from Disneyland to death in the span of 2 minutes. All right. We would argue that that young lady had a self-abusing advisor. She was beating herself up from the inside out. All right. And an advisor, it ends up turning into a filter. We all have filters. It's not good or bad, but a self-abusing filter becomes one that magnifies every negative that's in the world, and it filters out or dismisses any of the positives. And again, we all have filters. Conservative, progressive, bulletproof. Teen struggling with anxiety has one type of filter, depression another. A teen identifying as gay, lesbian, gender fluid is going to have their own filter. And that list at the bottom there, I had the chance, I don't know, years ago now, but to meet with the social workers and counselors from Children's Mercy Hospital. And at the time, they were doing 1,800 adolescent suicide screenings a year. And I got the chance to ask them, so what are the main reasons that young people are coming in here with significant suicidal ideation? All right. And they said, well, 90 to 95% of those young people would fit into one of these 5 categories. They didn't feel like they had meaningful connections in their life. They were struggling with actual anxiety, depression, or eating disorder. They were still in the gender questioning phase. There was significant family conflict, or they were dealing with purpose, life, existential questions like what's the point? What's the purpose? Why bother with any of this? All right. So if I run into a young person and I find out they're struggling with any one of those, that's a yellow flag to me. And I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to learn more about their lives. If I find out they're struggling with any 2 or more from this list, I literally just assume that on a reasonably regular basis, the thought that the world might be better off without them, or that they could end all the emotional pain they're in, rotates into their advisor, into their head on a regular basis. All right, I just assume that's, and any one of those factors can push any of us towards kind of that self-abusive, negative kind of inner voice. I want to share how I think this looks kind of in a visual way, or how this it happens. And so I really like this picture. I've got 4 kids at home, and the cat represents those 4 kids. And you know, cats have great things about them, and cats have things that aren't so perfect about them, right? That's just a cat. And you know what my wife and I and what they hope for themselves is represented in that bold shadow of a lion that's there, and what they want to be in the future. And right now, I think I have an actress, a professional soccer player, an engineer, and a vet. I think that's what their hopes are right now. But this is kind of what I imagine, just, you know, our brains with all the hormones and everything just look like on a normal kind of basis. So, you know, let's just take a look at ourselves right there with just a normal brain. You could still see the cat and the lion pretty clearly. let's throw in, we all have daily stuff, chores and teams we might be on, or work or homework or those kind of things. And it adds some clutter there, but you know what? You can step back and say, yeah, I can see who I am right now. And I can look at the future and say, you know what, I want to be a writer, or I want to be a biologist, or I want to be creative and do something in the future. Well, let's throw in a self-abusing advisor. This young person's probably struggling to get out of bed some days. All right, it's just hard to get out of bed. And guarantee they're having a hard time doing their schoolwork because the advisor influences our ability to think and our cognitive regulation. All right. And the two screens are different, so maybe you should look at both of them at some point. But either one of them make it very, very hard to imagine a hopeful future. So if you're struggling with a self-abusive advisor, it is really hard to imagine that tomorrow or the next day or the future could be amazing and hopeful. And you know, you start to think about it as like, man, can we just get rid of that advisor? But we can't. It's got some upsides. It protects us from danger. It's really not a good idea. We need a voice in our head, actually, that says, hey, it's dark. Don't go in a dark alley. We need that voice in our head. It promotes high-speed evolution. I know for a fact, no matter how smart I am, I cannot learn and do all the pieces to create a phone, right? Like, so as people, we move forward better. It promotes fast and efficient functioning, and it provides helpful rules. Like, most of us know the rule that we come into a room like this and there's somebody up front talking. We're supposed to at least act like we're listening to them, right? That's a helpful rule. On the other hand, you get to go to a Royals game or a Chiefs game or something like that, and you know you can just jump up and start yelling and screaming kind of whenever you want, right? Those are helpful rules to know. With that, it's got some pretty significant downsides, all right? It can lead to rigid rule following. So the extreme of that is OCD and I need to knock 3 times or somebody in my life is going to, you know, have some hurt in their life kind of thing. The rigid rule following we tend to see in group is more like the young man who joined us. And his rule was, I have to try the hardest I possibly can when I'm given a task. Sounds like a reasonable, like a good, useful rule until you realize he was really good at math and really good at chemistry and not overly athletic and still had gym class. He came in one day and he's like, you guys got to run a mile today. All right. His rule kicks in. I got to run this mile the very hardest I possibly can. There's no permanent damage, but I sure don't need to be going outside and running a mile the hardest I can right off the bat. Right. It's just not something that should happen. And so it's rigid rules. It absorbs others' unhelpful ideas really easily. And so, you know, maybe you're talking with some friends and you're like, just so much emotional pain. It's just going all the time. And they're like, man, I tried vaping and boom, just cut it right off. And you're like, right then, you've got that. You picked it up. Or like, I'm just numb. I don't feel anything. I don't feel like doing anything. And the world's just blah. Somebody's like, well, try cutting. You know, I tried cutting once and boom, immediately we can pick up those really negative ideas. All right. It can become decontextualized, which is kind of like, I'm going to create a world in my head that I want to be in more than I want to be in the physical world. And it can distort oncoming information. That's kind of why I think about it as a filter. And then it can become self-abusing, which I tried to walk us through a little bit. So that's the advisor. At some point, we're going to ask you to draw a picture of your advisor. And this was a young man, obviously had access to more than one color, and still drew his own advisor. That his inner voice in his head is this black swirling tornado of words like evil and outcast and worthless and bad person and stupid and nobody likes you. The 2 pink ones, if you can't read them, say, you know, worth it and you're amazing. So somebody was speaking into their life. And this is it's an interesting one because we didn't ask him to do that part at the bottom, but he's like, if anybody asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to tell you I'm fine. So this is a young man that told people he was doing just fine, and that's how he imagined his own advisor voice in his head. So at some point, we're also going to ask you to write a letter to your advisor. I'm going to share a letter from 8th grade girl, cute as a button, got along with her parents really well, actually. And I don't believe she actually cussed out loud because I kind of knew the family, right? And this is still what was going on in her head. Dear advisor, you are never necessarily helpful to me. One moment you're telling me I'm wonderful, and the next you're calling me ugly and effing worthless and unlovable. You'll tell me that no one wants to be around me, and you make me insecure. I effing hate you. You're ruining my life, making me choose to make decisions and ruin good relationships. Throughout my whole life, you tricked me into thinking I'm loved, cared for, and worth being here, just to stab me in the back and tear me down piece by piece. You love to tell me how effing sensitive, dingy, and annoying I am, and how much of a bother I am to anyone and everyone. You need to effing shut the hell up and change your attitude. Be more caring. Stop making me feel like a POS. Tell me I'm beautiful and unique and important, smart and kind, without turning around and saying the opposite. Make me feel loved. I have somewhere near 600 of these letters. This one's just kind of in the middle. I didn't go grab an extreme one. And it's important to figure out how to unhook from this advisor voice, because it does influence our cognitive regulation, which is essentially our ability to manage our thoughts, our attention, and our processes, our mental thinking to achieve goals or control responses. And if you're not able to unhook, and it kind of comes out as looking like extreme or polarized or black and white thinking and acting. Poor perspective taking, and poor perspective taking leads to poor conflict resolution. Invalidation of self and others. So this might be, someone who, like, they don't say it out loud, but they like look around and they're like, those are horrible shoes, right? And they're literally teaching their own advisor how to judge themselves at that point in time, all right? As you are able to unhook, and we use that word a lot, from this negative advisor in your head, you start making constructive and respectful choices. You have a bias towards consistently meeting commitments and fulfilling obligation, and it improves executive functioning, which is just the ability to plan, strategize, and implement complex tasks. So my wife and I adopted a couple of kids from the foster care system, and we got a young man. He's got good share of trauma in his life, but he's still struggling, and we know he has a self-abusing advisor. All right. He's also a fairly stud soccer player for 8, 9, and 10-year-old. He's 10 now, right? So any one person, one-on-one, he can go by him, and he's the best kicker on his competitive team, right? But in the last year and a half, he's recognized that he doesn't know what to do in open space. I don't think he thinks about it this way, but he doesn't know how to strategize, and he can't handle the complexity of it because he started asking to play goalie. Goalie has one goal, right? Stop the ball from going in the net. He's recognizing he's struggling with that executive functioning stuff. And so it's kind of a negative example, but we're hoping as we can get him to unhook from those voices, his negative voices in his head, he'll be able to come back and get better at that. So with this, I want to do a little bit of an experiment. I do keep using that unhooking word. I want to have you figure out what that means. And so I'm going to throw a poem up on the screen and ask you to read it to yourself and see if you can do what it says. All right? All right. So I do want a show of hands. Who could listen to yourself? All right. Who could make it really loud, like inside their head? All right. All right. Who's willing to do their crotchety old man voice? Oh, you guys are good. That's where I use my behavioral techniques. Come Come on, Lainey, do your crunchy old man voice. I get to pick on her. She's a
No one hear that.
all right. Some of it's for my own entertainment. Usually I can get a dad to like get into the mood kind of thing, but if you could do any one of those four things, you can learn how to unhook from that advisor voice. And why do we call it the advisor? Because, you know, if it's giving you bad advice, why should you take it? I'm going to go with this Hudson first. Do you take every piece of advice that's given to you? No. Caitlin, do you take every piece of advice given? No. Nathan, do you take other Hudson? Well, if you're not going to take every piece of advice from your parents or your teachers or anyone, why should you take every piece of advice from your own advisor in your own head? I will say that's a hard concept to get because the young lady I shared about earlier, she thought she was telling herself she'd be better off dead. All right. And she was very strong not to have given in to it yet. Till she learned how to unhook from that voice. And like, well, what do I do if I don't listen to the voice in my own head? Well, if it's not giving you good advice, we'd ask you to listen to your values. All right. That's why we start there. But okay. And not good. My head saying don't try out. My values say I want to at least try this or attempt this in my life. And so maybe listen to that instead. After we've learned about our advisor, we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. But I want to start by teaching your first breathe deeply and slow down skill or coping. And this is square breathing, and we teach it on day one. We've had about 800 young people go through the program. This may not be their favorite skill, but this is the one we hear is the most useful in the most different areas of their life. All right. So it's pretty simple. You inhale slowly for a 4 count. You hold your breath for 4. You exhale slowly for the whole 4 count. You hold it out, and then you repeat a couple of times. So I'm going to run us through this. I had a young person go through the program that also had ADHD, and they had been taught to do it with their fingers. So if you're looking at me, you're going to see me doing it with my fingers because it helps me focus. But I shut my eyes. I also use this to calm myself down. All right. So inhale slowly, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale slowly. 2, 3, 4. Hold it out. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale slowly. 2, 3, 4. Hold it out. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. All right, go back to normal breathing. Anyone feel any calmer or slower after doing that? It's not something you get immediately, but if that's something you can practice, it's very helpful. I do a lot of public speaking, and sometimes I just go ahead and start with this one so I can act like I'm teaching a skill. Actually, I'm calming myself down to be able to stay in that place. So with that, I want to talk about the dark side of avoidance, because you're struggling with anxiety or depression. You're avoiding something at some point. All right. And we do it because it feels really good in the short term. If we are not wanting to do something and the opportunity comes up to miss it, it just feels really good. And that's just reinforcing. All right. So I'll show you kind of in a cycle. I'm going to start with anxiety. So if you're anxious, you start avoiding scary things. And that might be, it might be snakes or buses or planes, but it also might be feelings and responsibilities. And if you start avoiding things, it reduces the amount of activity in your life. It increasingly restricts your life. So kind of like putting blinders on a horse, you see less opportunity, and it undermines confidence. Why would it undermine confidence? Well, let's just imagine you wanted to try out for a play. You knew when the tryout day was in the fall. You're like getting yourself ready for it. You're all prepared. And that day comes and it's a bad day, right? And we've all had bad days, and you don't make it in the door and you don't try out what you think to yourself is, well, there's another play coming up. I'll get to try out for the next one, right? But as you get closer and closer to the next one, your advisor has actual facts. Hey, you couldn't do this last time. Why do you possibly think you can do this? Why bother? You know, those kind of things that undermine your confidence and make it harder to even try. All right. When that starts happening, it worsens how you feel, both physically and emotionally, leads to more anxiety. Anxiety leads, we see this cycle from anxiety right into depression. But you know what? It can start with depression. It can start with that, you know, like, oh, I don't have any energy. I don't want to do anything. Start reducing the total amount of activity in your life. And when you start reducing that, it ends up, man, a loss of things that used to give you fun, pleasure, or a sense of achievement. All right. And a sense of achievement is where we get, and I'm going to keep saying this, but a dopamine hit. And that's a pleasure sensation. It really helps us move forward. And what does that look like? Well, maybe you used to like to go biking a lot, right? And then a Saturday morning, a friend calls you up and says, hey, let's go biking. And you're like, no, I'm kind of depressed. I don't have much energy. I don't feel like doing that. Well, you've already given up the endorphins from doing physical activities that really help our bodies. And you've also given up that sense of achievement. You know, that sense of like, I'm going to go on a bike ride for 5 miles, and then you start. And all you actually have to do is start, is set a goal and start, and you'll get that dopamine hit. Because you might say, I'm going on a 5-mile bike ride, and you get out there half a mile, and you're like, not today. And you turn around, but you actually set a goal and you started moving towards it. All right. But when you don't, and again, both for physical and mental reasons, it worsens how you feel. It leads to more depression. And we regularly see this cycle into hopelessness and despair. All right. So you put them together. You're struggling with anxiety and or depression, leads to unhelpful behaviors, which might be avoidance, but it might be cutting. It might be vaping. It might be something else. Those lead to new or worsening of problems that you already have. It leads to worsening how you feel about yourself. And it just becomes this vicious cycle that you get caught up in. And I want to show you what's supposed to happen when we feel a threat and when we get stuck in that cycle. So on this, the black line is supposed to represent what's supposed to happen to our bodies when we have a threat. We're supposed to be in this place, that green space of calm, connected, it's grounded, we're compassionate, we're curious. And when we have a threat, doesn't really matter what it is, it shoots us up into that fight or flight range. All right. And that can look like anger or fear, anxiety, frustration, panic. And if the threat does not let up, like it just keeps feeling like it's threatening you, it shoots us up into that red zone. All right. And that red zone, if you're there for very long, ends up looking like numbness or shutting down or hopelessness or feeling trapped or depression. All right. And our body is supposed to calm all the way back down into that green zone. But if you're not like fighting a bear, or you're not doing something like, maybe it's like going to school that shoots you up into that feels like a threat. So what keeps us in that red zone? Our advisor, that voice in your head that says you can't do it. You know, you're not going to make it. You didn't do it last time. And it just keeps you up in that red zone all the time. So the gray line is that avoidance cycle. And I'm going to show both sides here. So I want to talk about the top of this first one. So what happens at the top of that very first F there is that when you try something new, it causes an amount of distress in you in some way, shape, or form. All right. And we're going to ask you to try new skills. Literally, the whole point is to try new skills. And so you should feel a level of distress. And instead of avoiding it, which is what you might do when you're just struggling in the world, you know, to calm yourself back down, we're going to ask you to use a skill like square breathing. Calm yourself down and then try whatever that new skill is, or try whatever it is kind of you've set that goal for. So for everybody's sake, the top, that one on the right, top of there, this is mainly for parents' sake. There is something that shoots your young person into that red zone almost immediately right now, right? That's why you're here with us. Square breathing doesn't work there. All right. So I don't want anybody going home. Use square breathing on this worst thing. It doesn't work that way. The reason, so DNAV is one of our models. The other model is DBT, because at some point, if you fire right up into that red zone, there are some skills you've lost because you've been avoiding certain things for a certain amount of time, and it just means you don't have some skills. And so that's why we're teaching DBT skills, to put some of those back into place. But I really want parents to think about, just because we've learned square breathing, we can't handle the biggest thing. You know, that's the point of practice, right? Is that we learn something, we practice it a lot, and then we can use it when it really matters. But with that, it's important to think about what types of things get avoided. Physical activities, social interactions, scary things, again, from phobias to feelings, responsibilities. Parental interactions get avoided, interactions with authorities. That could be teachers, coaches. None of us really like pain, but you can't move forward in an athletic or relationships without some kind of physical and emotional pain. Conflict, challenges start getting avoided. And sadly, you get to a point where, like, you're avoiding things you don't even know could bring you vitality and value into your life. Saddest thing for me about this list is that I can change the title of the list from what types of things get avoided to what types of things have to be accomplished to be independent. So to be an independent young person, you've got to be able to do most of the things on this list. So I know I've said it a couple times, feelings, responsibility. Some of these things feel like how do you avoid a feeling? And what would that look like? And so I want to give you an example. None of us like failure. I'm not saying that, but some of us, like our whole body is against failure. Like, we just don't want to be there. We don't want to get anywhere close to that situation. And so let's imagine that algebra makes us feel like a failure. All right. So got an algebra second block. So it's earlier in the day. Teacher just gave this huge new concept that I didn't understand when I was in class. All right. I'm already avoiding interactions with authority, so I'm sure not going to go ask for help from the teacher, and I got all day to think about it, right? So by the time I get home, I'm already in a really bad mood, and I toss my book bag in the middle of the room. What do parents do when a bag gets thrown in the wrong place? Hey, pick it up. Take that up to your room, kind of thing. And you're like, stop nagging me. It's already been a no good, rotten, lousy day. And you're like, I don't need that kind of attitude, right? We don't need to, like, just get it and get it to your, and it starts turning into this fight, right? And it goes back and forth. And by the time, pretty quickly fires off, they run to their room and slam the door. They're in that red zone, I promise you. And in that red zone, if they can even remember they have an algebra assignment, they are nowhere near cognitively able to do it. And you as a parent are sitting somewhere else in the house going, don't want to deal with that creature tonight. You don't even know they have an algebra assignment due until you check their grades a couple weeks later, right? So that is a very active, conflictual situation. And I'm not saying every argument you have is that, but in some cases it might be that you've just had a fight or an argument or something else, and it was somebody trying to avoid a feeling. And that would be what defense mechanisms are. Anything we do behaviorally that tries to protect us from having feelings, all right? We have found this to be probably one of our most important concepts. And so, young people, if you would open your binders up to the front cover, inside the front cover, there should be a sheet that has that symbol on it, the defense mechanism. Yeah, should look like this. And parents, if you would turn to page 2 in your packets, you should have exactly the same sheet. Defense mechanisms. Young people, I would like you to read through that list. Lainey, you get to do this one also. About yourself. And just check any of those defense mechanisms you've ever tried, and circle the ones that you find that interfere with your life. All right, parents, I want you to think about your young person and do the same thing. Check mark all of those that you've seen or think they've used, and then circle those that you think are interfering in their lives. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to work on this. principal at my kid's school is calling, so I'm going to quickly take that. But in your family groups, again, I'd like you guys to share in both directions, parent and kids, the defense mechanisms that you see, and just see if you can come up with 3 or 4 of them that are maybe willing to confront during the program. Yeah. What happens? That's the most important. Did you find something? Yes.
Back to
Did your parents find something where you have some? Are there any ones to drop one name? That is a very We're going to teach a skill. At the end of the day, we're just only being things happen. The right one. That's an international. I hate to cut a conversation off. Looks like you guys are actually talking and walking through some things, but keep us moving. One of our hopes from this is that you find 2 or 3, 4 of these that you're willing during the program to confront, and that's the language we use. But like, we teach you a new skill that day. It's like, how would I confront my defense mechanism of this by using that skill? All right. Doesn't guarantee it's going to happen, and it's not easy, but that's the conversation that we're going to have. I shift a little bit into kind of just some orientation and some things we want you to know on day one. And at about 4:30, Lainey will take the young people to the annex where the rest of the young people are, and parents will continue to meet down here. All right. So because we talk about this almost every single day, we want you to know the kind of the DBT concept of that we all have three states of mind. We have a rational mind, we have an emotional mind, and we have a wise mind. All right. So rational mind is kind of like makes decisions on what makes intellectual sense, thinks logically, focuses on the facts, compares current experiences to past experiences. This is kind of your Spock, your Data, your Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. You know, if you lean into this a lot, like I'm trying to just use my intellect to get through the world. All right. None of these are good or bad. We all have all of them. The challenge is, what do we do when we're struggling? What's our default? What do we lean towards? All right. So I shared earlier, I'm ADHD. So it turns out I'm a very emotional minded person. All right. That's actually where my mind is. But I've spent so much of my life learning skills and strategies that my default when I struggle or when I'm in a challenging situation is to move into rational mind. All right. Amazing when you do crisis management. All right. And I've done crisis management or a pager. I can walk into kind of where a young person is in a dangerous situation. I'm very calm and controlled. I make people feel safe and I can handle the situation. And I've learned how to process my emotions later, right? So it's super useful in those situations. On the other hand, I've already shared, I got 4 kids at home. At any given moment, 2 of them may be in complete chaos and the other 2 are completely defiant. And my world is just going in circles and chaotic. And because even in that struggle, I move into rational mind, I want order. I want it to make sense. You know, I want it to feel like it's factual. And so what do? I'm like, you're in timeout. You're in timeout. You're in timeout. You know, and I try and control the structure. But I ignore the fact that I love these children. And when you do that from rational mind, they can feel it. They can feel that you are not showing that emotion and that you love them. So that's what I'm, why when it goes too far, when I move into my rational mind. Let's go the other way. Emotional mind. Decisions are based on what feels good. All right. Thinks and focuses on emotions a lot. Reactive and or defensive, those defense mechanisms. This would be, I know of situations where young people like get overwhelmed and they end up in the fetal position kind of crying for a couple of hours, right? That's when the emotional mind has taken over in some way, shape, or form. And the emotional mind is, so the rational mind just tries to suppress or ignore emotions. The emotional mind is actually opposed to the rational mind. And just think about this scenario. Somebody's crying and you come up and you use a rational mind statement like calm down. Justin, got a couple of people, right? You're literally just adding fuel to that fire. You are making it worse because in emotional mind, we are opposed to rational or logical things. On the other hand, and it can be a slope. And if you lean into emotional mind and you get out of control, that's when you're feeling emotional pain and those kind of things. On the other hand, I would argue that the most incredible art and music throughout history have been made by people in emotional mind, trying to find ways to express that into the world. So again, none of these are good or bad. And we're not even going to say it's our goal for you to be in wise mind all the time, right? But you need to know where your mind is at. You need to know where you go when you're struggling. And if you're in a place and you're like, I've got to make a good decision here, can you go into wise mind when you need to? And what is wise mind? Wise mind is recognizing, you know what, let's imagine we have a big stack of homework because you're not going to school. You end up with a big stack of homework, right? And you look at emotional mind. I have not found the emotion on the emotion wheel that makes it feel good to do homework. I've just not found that emotion just yet. All right. And yet As soon as you think about that, you know you're going to fail that class. You're going to fail this year of school. You're not going to graduate high school. Sure, not going to get the job you want to do because you're not going to college. And then you're not going to marry or have an enjoyable life in any way, shape, or form. And it goes just that fast. I have no doubt. All right. And so when you're in wise mind, it's like, yeah, I don't want to do this homework. I don't feel like it. I know I'm going to fail. So what do? Well, maybe depending on how big the struggle is, I'm going to take one concrete assignment out of that pile. I'm going to work on that one assignment and get it done. And then I'm going to go take a break. And I'm going to feed my emotional mind so that I rest and I feel good. But the whole goal would be to come back and try to do the next assignment. You will hear that cycle from us a lot. So wise mind isn't our goal to just be in wise mind all the time. It's to know where you're at. Because there are things that it's better to be in rational mind. You know, if you're looking for the emotional content of a math test, you're just going to frustrate yourself, right? You just need to do it as a logical thing. All right. So with this, I've chatted through values, kind of that what's important to you, what matters, your strengths. It's the compass that hopefully gives you direction. The discoverer and the noticer will hit on, but the discoverer is like, all right, some of the ways that I'm interacting with the world right now aren't working for me. So how do I find new and different ways that bring vitality and value into my life? Noticer is kind of emotion regulation. Can you notice what's going on inside of you? Can you notice what's going on outside of you and respond appropriately? And that advisor, again, is that inner voice. And how do we unhook from it when it's not helpful to us? And to put it all together, we don't spend a lot of energy on this, but I want you to think about it. If you're moving towards feeling natural in your own skin, an authentic life, we're going to argue that as you strengthen your value, as you move towards things that are important to you, you will become and feel more authentic in yourself. But you got to deal with all those intense feelings that you got going on. You got to deal with worry, panic, shame, masking emotions. So like, some young people have, at some point, like their anxiety has stopped their family from doing 10 things, right? And now they're ashamed because their anxiety has interfered with their family. Well, shame is a masking emotion. It is not a core emotion. Defense mechanisms, you guys just walked through that sheet. And I'm never going to make anyone do a sheet like that if it's not a core part of what we're trying to figure out. So existential questions are all there. All those things make up our advisor realm that you need to figure out how to unhook from. How do you unhook from your advisor? Guess what? You bolster your noticer. You unmask. You recognize that you have emotional needs that aren't getting met all the time. That's why you're angry. Engage your discoverer by confronting those defenses and igniting some sparks, which is like just finding a passion that you want to move towards in your life. All of that helps you get your emotional needs met, make wise mind decisions, and continue to forge an authentic life. And we're going to argue, and you're going to see bold on everything, that bold is a process for making wise mind decisions. So if you don't know what to do in a situation, can you breathe deeply and slow down? So that might be using square breathing. Why do you slow down? So you can observe your thoughts, you can observe your feelings, not just react to them, but observe them and maybe respond to them. And how do you respond to them? Well, let's listen to your values. Listening to your values, then deciding on actions. And it's a process because we're going to teach you anywhere from 10 to 20 skills in each one of these categories. Because again, Caitlin, I so wish I could just hand you 4 steps and say this is going to make your life as good as you want it to be. I can't do it. You're going to have to figure out which of these skills work for you. And then hopefully you put them in order underneath that bold. But we're going to teach you a lot of different things in each one of those categories. So I want to move into paid practices. We gave you each a little plastic pencil holder. If you'd pull that out for me. So everything we teach has evidence behind it, which means it works for somebody somewhere. It works for a lot of people. But that does not mean I know for a fact it's going to work for Nathan. All right. So this is what we would call a starter self-soothe kit. Everything in there, the hard candy, the suckers, the gum, the mints, and the squishy things, all of those have research that says they help you calm yourself down. That doesn't mean they're going to work for Hudson. I don't know what's going to work for Hudson. But if you take that, and I gave you a whole list of examples, and you make a kit that helps you calm down, like you can open it up and like, oh, I like this smell, or these pictures, or these sounds, and you make it your own and you personalize it and you come back and show somebody on the team, we're going to give you a $10 gift card. That's why we call it a paid practice. You practice something we know that the evidence says works, and you're willing to try it, we'll give you a $10 gift card. That makes sense, Hudson? This Hudson. Hudson to my right, Hudson to my left. It's going to be, you guys are going to have fun. So my kindergarten class had 5 Jasons in it. We were 5 different people. So when the teacher said Jason, everyone in the class paid attention because they didn't know if somebody was getting in trouble, somebody was answering a question, somebody was destroying something in the bag. So it's going to be fun for us to have a couple Hudsons in here. If you guys would turn to that colored folder, the colored tab in the back of your binder, because you can actually take somewhere around $240, $250 in gift cards. You can earn that much while you're in the program. All right, and this is a list of them on there. So the first one, the top of the list, and it's the colored tab at the back of your binder. I love that, Hudson. My kids don't clean up anything after they're done. He just put that all away very nicely before he went on to his next thing. So, all the way to that back last tab. So the one at the top says BYO Sensory Kit for Self-Soothing. I just talked through that one. The next one is the Vitality Playlist, and that's taking those value domains that I asked you to pick one from each. Pick 3 or 4. Find a song, that reminds you of each of those values, and turn that into a musical playlist that you might put on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you keep your music, all right? And then you submit a worksheet with a little bit of the reasons why. And at that point, you've now created a list of music that you already like, songs you like, that remind you of things that matter to you, all right? And again, not picking songs for me. Early on when we did this, a young lady picked a K-pop song, all right? Early K-pop was all Korean. She didn't understand Korean. I sure didn't. But that song reminded her of that value, and that's all that matters in that situation. All right. The Caring Advisor is kind of a journaling activity if you want to, get a jump start on unhooking from your advisor. I know Hudson to my right said creativity. So the next one is creative catharsis, and there are 8 possible ways to kind of express emotions. And each one of those would pay $10 if you chose to follow our instructions. On the back of the page is Bolster Your Noticer. And this is a scan code to download the app How We Feel. How We Feel was put together. It's a free app. It was in partnership with Yale. And what you do is it kind of like says check in at these 4 times during a day, and it asks you what your emotions are right at that moment. And then it may ask you for some other information, but if you do that over like a week or so, you might look at this really cool graphical thing and be like, wow, every day at 2 o'clock, I'm kind of struggling. What's going on? Oh, I'm not eating lunch. All right. So maybe you figure out by the pattern you see like what's going on with you. It's a kind of a cool graphical thing. It will, when you're struggling, it'll also kick up some coping strategies if you need them. So that one's Bolster Your Noticer. The last one I want to talk about is if you will turn that tab over and look at the back of it. Take the whole tab over, and you're looking at the bold bivouacking paid practice. All right. We are the 2 Tents program, and bivouacking means to establish a shelter and start an engagement. So you guys are all starting an engagement today. This packet had, 10 of the most important concepts that you're going to learn while you're in the program, but you will learn them all just by showing up and coming through the program. I would much rather, and if you ever fill this packet out after you've learned them all, it's worth $10. On the other hand, I would much rather have this information in your head and us be able to help you apply it to your life. So if you do this particular packet before next Monday, it's worth $20 in gift cards. $10 anytime, $20 if you do it by next Monday. Because that allows us to then just work. And parents, none of these are assignments. This is completely just extra and opportunities for you guys to try something out. So that is paid practices. I'm not going to spend much energy here, but there are things that interfere with the whole group moving forward. I'm not expecting any of them from you guys, but if they come up, usually we find a way to talk to you one-on-one and just bring it up, because there's 8 to 10 to maybe 12 at some point in the group, and all of you are important. And we want everyone to be moving forward in some form or fashion. And with that, I am done. For the first half here, do any young people have any questions? No? All right. I'm going to have you gather your stuff and go with Lainey, and hopefully Gabby will give you a little bit of a break, and there's snacks in the annex room. And do take the sheet that I asked you to start with today, because you'll turn that into Gabby at the end of the day. And parents, once they get let out, I'll give you guys a couple minutes break, and then we'll meet back in here. And I do have, at the very least, cold waters for you guys if anybody would like. I can get you some chips if you're really desperate, but I do have cold water for everybody, or anybody. There is. And I'll head you up there, because breaks aren't just for children, for kids. Does anybody want a cold water? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And follow me. And yes, we'll be back in this room. It's fairly safe for in this capacity. So. Did you say there's an
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Carson, did you just push your trip a day? Are you doing it
Did.
tomorrow? Okay.
Yep, I finished my trip, so I'll leave tomorrow. My flight thing ticket 6:30.
You gone the rest of the week?
So I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be back.
So Justin, will you be able to join Hudson Wednesday?
Then, yeah, then I'll be there.
Okay.
And, actually, I traveled again. Actually,
Yeah.
I traveled. What do you do?
Our jobs.
I don't know about not mine, but it's busy month.
To water
Thank
right
you.
there. The plane is coming. You got 2 drinks in front of me, but did you want a cold water also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, more than willing to get you one. Anybody have any questions? Like sometimes we don't want to ask, you don't want to ask in front of your young people or something just jumped up before we move on at all. Just give me a minute to get back in here.
I had one. So Hudson's got a little brother who's already asking him to answer questions. Since I'm getting a question, everything. So it's not like suggestions. Should I haven't asked him Hudson to come in, but
Yeah.
10 years old to give a point of reference.
Yeah, no, I have 2
And I call him
10-year-olds.
TMZ because it's always like, excuse me.
Does he know Hudson struggles with anxiety?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I really knew it. So
So
the
we're
last
okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's a good question because my 10-year-old would drive me batty with that. I just feel like, Hudson he is working on his schoolwork and himself differently right now, so it doesn't look the same. And he needs to do that. And you know what? You're different people, and you guys need different things, and we're doing the same with my kids, because we got 3 of them that are kind of a mesh, 8, 10, and 10, because we adopted, and it's like they all think they're one entity. I'm like, no, they spent 20 hours doing this. They earned that, and the other ones all want the same thing, So, but I think I would go with something like that. Hudson he's working on some stuff, and he's working on it differently than you are right now, and this is what he needs to be doing right now. And then just kind of, live that. Right. And then if Hudson gets to a place where he's like willing to share any of his struggles, then you have a little bit of a different conversation. And you'll also know Hudson's moving if he gets to a point where he's admitting now to you and to himself that something's going on. That's not easy.
Yes, that's it. Yes, that's it. Yeah. So there's 15 been frustrating.
Yeah. 16 sister. 8.
This is an older sister that's on the way. So
Figured out how to figure
He's
out
always
information.
investigating. We'll tell him that somebody late start.
I want to say personally, I'm okay with people. It's a late start thing. Feels like that's a little bit of a white lie, but maybe an okay one until things move forward. She's gonna be fine, but she's been with us since February. She just hadn't been able to us. So she's already connected with some of the young people, and one of them needed a check-in. Everyone in the group has their own set of struggles, and everything we can do to make a curriculum like where we're showing the same things to everybody personalized, we do. And one of those is somebody wanted to talk to Lainey. Sorry, we're going to talk to her right now. If you didn't notice at the beginning, we didn't spend a lot of time on introductions. It turns out teenagers don't care that much about our lives. And I can't do all of this in fun, exciting ways. So when I don't have to bore them, I choose not to bore them, right? On the other hand, you are all dealing with young people that are struggling. And there's not a whole lot of places to talk about it. And you'll all be together in family day. Your kids will know each other. It happens. We actually actively work on building community with them. And so going to go this way just to keep track of myself. But Daniel, I'll ask you to share whatever's going on with Hudson and the family that brought you to us today.
So I'm Daniel. I haven't just mentioned Hudson's my middle kid. His older sister is in college. Hudson, literally up until about 3 weeks ago, if you'd asked me if he's struggling with anything, I would have no. He went from being in grade school and president of his 8th grade class, good athlete, went to a big high school. I think in a lot of ways kind of got absorbed. And then his mom and I are divorced for about 4 years now. We're separated. In hindsight, I think he's probably struggling partly from that. He was always kind of, at least in my eyes, the strong kid of my 3 kids. Would have never guessed. And I'll be honest with that. It was hard to see kind of what's happened to him last month. But what I would also say is the kid faced it immediately. Basically said, I don't know what's causing this time. Just stressed out. It really just became a king of school. Walking those doors of school, and I right there, called me, I'm throwing up. He couldn't get past 10 again. Of course, I'm sitting like, you got to push through this. Like, this school. But I realized there's something. And we had a talk, and it was clear he wanted to get help, and I couldn't help. So I'm glad we're here. I'm glad he wanted to do it as hard as it might be. Clearly wants to get better, to get back to it. I think everything you're talking about, he absorbs stuff. So I think hearing what you're saying, teaching advice to him, whatever it is that he's struggling with, whether it's anxiety, depression, both.
Right.
I think he absorbs this like he has everything else in his life to figure out how to deal with. It's a struggle, he's weighing. Just want him to get better.
Yeah, that whole self-awareness piece, like we don't even get abstract thinking until 8, 9, 10, and it sounds like he used some really good strategies in middle school. President athletics, like if I keep my life full, I don't focus much inward, and that changed on him. And then it's hard. And so no, I appreciate. Yeah, he appears very willing, which is all I ask. Team will find a way to reach him. So I'm actually looking forward to having it. Coming around the circle. And there we go.
Sister. Something. He's suffering with anxiety. Really, if we think about it, teachers can start noticing money, which you can so into the types of things like just really struggles came out. They have struggled for years. Tried multiple different things. The track, cat, like treatment center, exposure therapy, actual, like, very minor diagnoses and things that if it starts, it ends up in his head and he cannot come down separate from it. That's had an issue for things right? Lots of it's their guy had not there times I get up in the morning. I think all of my example. So that's just very I recognize that in myself that I have those issues now from him. He had a really good year last year. Right, wants to have he had a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and people who are people that's insane and smart. It's very, very intelligent. But he just struggles with the anxiety. But this past year, fall in August, he got sick. We were in the hospital for 3 days. 2 weeks later, we were back in the hospital for a couple of days. They were sick all throughout the fall semester. The days of school, this and everything, and it just they get a diagnosis. He has an endocrine problem, Addison's disease. So he has to take medication 3 times a day for the rest of his life. He initially accepted that really well. He has a lung size from 3 good weeks of treatment, and then just did some infection. System and easily integrate just have a 2 hospital stay. Has not been in school for a couple months at this time. He might get there for an hour or so to where the counselor was like, the only classes he needs to graduate is his first walk, but the morning is the first time for him. And so it's been a struggle to get in there. Just this past week, they ended up saying 2 weeks left of school. He's done. He's done his criteria. He has to go 2 tests, but otherwise, we're just done because testing process. Like there are just multiple things going on. Like he's getting sick. One thing to say all of this is, I think it's because there were so many issues in the fall that he's having hospital stays. We are just like multiple things, and they finally found something. Thinks in his head, well, there's not even something that's they just haven't found it, and when we find it, then that'll be the fix. It would be sort of struggles that we have for years. So I'm excited. Like I said, we've done so much therapy. We've done this has been multiple years. We've been struggling with this. This is the first time where someone's kind of addressing instead of just that exposure therapy and going and you're going to push through, you're going to keep going. Like to have him really take a step back and analyze the thoughts of what is helpful or not helpful. I'm very excited for this. Can definitely see the value and how it's different than what we've trained for. So he's supposed to go into college in the fall. We don't know if we have meetings with them and we can't take it back the year without them through the scholarship. So we really just want to get in a good place.
One of the challenges with being gifted is you can intellectually understand things before you have the emotional capacity to process them. And he's had that his whole life because he thinks differently than other people do. And then you have real problems. I'm not surprised that he spiraled after that pneumonia. Like, fine, you know, like it just, I'm sure it just feels like he keeps taking gut punches. Every time he turns around, something else comes up, and it's, you know, some people it's relationships, but in his case, it's like physical, you know, and it just keeps repeating. And without using actual skills or techniques, how would anyone possibly accept all of that? Much less that he has anxiety. You know, I mean, so hopefully we connect with him. This is, you know, I'm not that level of smart, but, you know, we do things more experientially, so you can't rationalize and intellectualize your way out of things. And it usually does a fairly good job. At one point, I've quit keeping track, but I think we were at 30-40% of our kids were gifted, right? Like scored there. And so we've kind of gotten, it's funny, another 20 to 30 of them are autistic, which can still be gifted, but I mean, you're hitting on both sides of the spectrum. So, you know, if he'll give us a chance, and he seemed really willing today, you know, if he'll give us a chance, I think we'll find a way to help him understand what's going on. Obviously, we're not fixing any of it, right? But if he does know how, and he can start picking up some skills like radical acceptance and some other things, and figuring out how to channel that intellect, you know, to challenge himself and move forward, that's going to be huge for him. So his values piece is going to be big. You know, what matters to me? What do I want to go fix in the world? Those kind of things are going to, you know, help him along.
This is so she go with this go with the so
And they are,
yeah.
because it's high school.
So
She seems strong coming in here. Like, you know, and is she willing to do this? Is she interested in?
she's interested in it. I'm big on that is
Yep. Yeah.
So she wanted.
Yeah, you guys might want to turn to page like the tip skill very quickly in the binder and start using some, like, we keep ice masks here in like literally in the freezer. So when a kid gets to that, so that whole self-soothe, that's the whole concept, is using your senses instead of your head. And so finding those ways for her is going to be important. A mint's not going to do it. You know, it's going to have to be stronger than that. Cold water, ice, something to maybe help break her out of the emotional mind cycle that she's getting into. And that's just for you guys to get through, because I'm sure it goes for a long period of time. And she doesn't want it to, which, so if she can just break the stuckness inside for enough to get going. But yeah, she did everything. She was very, I got lots of good eye contact. She was listening and paying attention. And so I think we can reach her, but you need some like immediate home help on that emotional mind. There's a difference between not going to school and a kid that just breaks down, because it's wearing on your body. It's physically wearing crime that much. And so just maybe ask her to flip through the tip. It's in the breed section right at the front of the binder, and just maybe think about some of those that you can do right away. Even holding ice in your hand is a more drastic than chewing a piece of gum or something. So.
Sour candy. I think to for school.
Yeah. Sour candy stops me flat. I was already doing youth ministry when Warheads came out, and I had no idea to actually pay attention to candy. So I'm on a bus with a bunch of kids and whip these things out. Here, Jason had one of these. Like what in the, who is buying it? You guys have a turn, however you want to do that.
I'm Gretchen, and Hudson is 14, and he is not going to school. That has been, he started protesting school, I would say, around third grade, where it was during COVID, and he also had to move schools and didn't have a friend babysitter to school, didn't like his school as much. That school transition doubly wrong. School. And since then, really has at certain times of the year struggled with going to school, but not like so we've been able to work through reward systems and all sorts of things to help him get to school. He's got 3 older sisters. Oldest is 20, 18, and 18-year-old, and so he also just has lots around him telling him what to do and how to do it. And I think for him, that he's lost a little bit of his voice. You have all these sisters who talk a lot and who decide things for you, and basically you put their part, right? But it hasn't had like the voice that the girls have had, for sure. So I think this year it really culminated. And I'm not sure why really. This year was a lot harder. But recently, as part of this, like, we're not going to school, we're going to uncover every stuff. What can we figure out? So we did get an ADHD diagnosis for him about a month ago, which he never had the hyperactivity. So it's always very well to hate kid, except it's not going to go to school. It's so smart. And so it could make sense not wanting to go to school because what's going on. So we started on some medication, and at that same time also took him to ENT, and the doctor said his tonsils are so big. And when your tonsils are so big, I feel so tired. And this could be another, or he's always having just been fighting through his health issue, brain. She's like, it can really affect a whole bunch of things. So he got on a really good schedule of going to school with that medication, and then had tonsillectomy. And he has not been back. And it's almost like 2 weeks off. It just stalled him out. It was like the anxiety of, I don't know if I can get back into that school. So even I still gave notes. I tried to talk with him. It's really so sweet and kind, and there's just nothing that it could go. So my oldest has been doing TV therapy, and we saw such great success with her. And learning skills, it's something she could really hold on to. So not just sitting around talking about feelings all the time, but also learning, like, what can I do with these things? And so when I saw him struggling in this Indigenous way, I thought, he's giving some skills. And so I think he's ready. He knows personally not another option. He knows he doesn't like how he feels. He knows he doesn't want to continue going on how, how things are going. And he does, he's really excited about high school. He's super excited about high school. And so I'm very glad that we're here. Hopefully we can continue your skills that he needs to, we can support him in that, his sisters can support him in that, to be able to succeed.
Just anything to add to that?
It's been interesting. I think it does feel like he's getting his voice a little bit more lately. He has been very quiet and will say like, I don't care, it doesn't matter all the time. It's kind of hard to pull his preferences out of him. Recently, he was talking about the whole school thing. I asked him, like, what's the feeling you have when we talk about going to school? And he was like, dread. Which I had never heard of. I wouldn't have considered that to be the thing if there was any sort of strong emotion attached to it. So, kudos for finding it, for him being involved. But he has resisted a lot of other attempts. Stupid fear doubts and stuff. So.
Our team is good at helping him get a voice. Like, and his sisters won't be here. Right? And none of the girls in there will be a sister. That will not be their goal. Did he happen to check boredom as one of his defense mechanisms? Did any of you check boredom? You did? Okay. Yeah, no, that. Yeah, and again, actually, your lesson this week on Wednesday, the family day, is on apathy versus finding sparks and finding meaningful kind of experiences. And I think you're kind of there with him. And I think he's looking forward to high school because there's more options, and he can maybe get specific. I know you shared he's gotten into an academy and all that's good, but if the social anxiety gets, if it's built up to a point where he doesn't feel like he can control it, that will go bad very quickly also.
Oh, totally. And right now he's like, why would I go to school? I don't really know any of these kids, and they're all going to go to different schools next year. So even if I were to become friends and stay friends, like we're all going to different high schools. So
Right.
What's the point? There's not even a friend draw to school. So
A lot of his motivation seems external because it's that, or he's bored, or the teachers don't. Like, Dad, what are you bringing to the table? Yeah. So I also like that it's going to take him kind of review what's important.
The values piece is going to be very important for him and figuring out what matters to him. Again, that's the intent to give him voice.
There's you just like if our end goal is to graduate from school. That lesson is all about so what small steps will it take to reach the goal? Okay, how do we get to graduate from school? Maybe we just start with like cards. No, not a good thing. How do we build it up? It's still going to be scary, but how do we make it less?
Yeah, and we set him up because I love that. And, Nathan's already done exposure kind of work, right? But when you apply that to values or skills or something else, a defense mechanism, and I know he checked those, the same exact principles of exposure is the small steps and then keep adding up to them to go after whatever you're looking for. So when we teach it, it's that way. It's not straight exposure. It's how, and it's the same thing any of us have done to gain skills in our life, like that's why you start as a freshman and you graduate as a senior, right? Like the whole, so it's that general principle. And I think the one thing we do is help them figure out how, sometimes from an adult perspective, it's how small the step seems, but to them, it's how big of a step can you take, right? And then can we all be okay with what doesn't seem like a very big step, but we're moving in a direction. And if you add those up, it's just, we tend to see, like, it seems like this huge list, and we're going to tell you need to stay at those early ones for a long time until they feel comfortable. And it's like, it's going to take forever to get through this. There becomes a speed up process at some point if they actually work it. But that's a big general principle that we will revisit. How big a step can you take, or how small does the step have to be? And then how do we take a break, feel good, get back to feeling, and then do the next thing that we need to do. With that, I do still have, well, after talking about our young people, sometimes I need a. So I'm getting circumcised tomorrow. My friend told me he had it done when he was a few days old. I asked him, does it hurt? So I couldn't walk for about a year. That to me is adolescent logic right there. A couple things that aren't connected in any way, shape, or form, they make causal, right? And then that image is just like, I talked to this person yesterday, and I was on top of the world, and then they didn't text me today, and it's all falling apart, right? It's just big emotions. And that's every adult, whether they're really struggling or they have reason to struggle, those kind of things. Which does lead us into, so the other model, DNAV, is acceptance commitment therapy, which has decades of research behind it. But the other model is DBT, so dialectical behavioral therapy. You guys are clearly familiar with that. But dialectics is just this crazy word that two completely opposite things could be true in the same exact young person, or any of us. It came from the borderline language of, I hate you, don't leave me, right? Like two things that don't make sense. And that's kind of what teens are, these dichotomies that are in the same place. It can also mean like there's extremes to different ideas, and like if you go too far down an extreme, it's not a good idea, so you need to find a way to walk a middle path. Well, again, teens are like literally the epitome of not walking the middle path. They are going to the extremes of whatever the situation might be. And so dialectics of adolescence is kind of like, there's some things we think about working with your young person, right? They are incredibly narcissistic creatures, all right? They are thinking about themselves a lot, but they also think that every other person in the room is thinking about them as much as they are, right? Just do the math. It's not possible. That's exactly what Caitlin's doing, right? She's like hyperdrive on herself, and then she thinks every single one of us is hyperdrive on her, right? So if you're working with them, you got to realize they're the most important thing to them. But they also want to be part of something. They want to be part of a tribe, a village, a people. I haven't heard any of you share it, but I see young people all the time diagnose themselves. And then like lean into that and go find a community online and like go deeper and deeper down kind of a rabbit hole as far as I'm concerned. I had 1 month where 2 different kids asked me to be autistic. I don't want to be autistic, right? But they had found a list and like it explained some of what they were thinking and feeling at the moment. It kind of gave them an excuse. And we don't get to know what that people or tribe or village that they want to be a part of is until they share it with us, right? So we got to kind of walk that middle path to keep working with them. Incredibly enough, they are all very fragile still on the inside, no matter how tough they're going to act on the outside. I look back at another different 8th grade girl than I shared the letter from, but again, cute as a button, had a great relationship with her dad, which is something I pay attention to, and sat in the intake with me and was like, yeah, I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with that and this is going on and I would like life to be this. And I'm like, great, group is going to be a good place for you. Got to group on Monday. We're sitting all in a circle. We're asking people why they're there. Get to hers left. I have no idea. Parents made me. I'm like, in that setting with other teens, she needed to seem tough or she at least thought she needed to seem tough. But what this means for our team is that we're going to act as if they want to be connected, as if they want to go to school or at least be challenged, whatever that means for them, right? You don't get lots of kudos from teens off the bat for acting as if, and we're just going to keep doing it, right? Until they get to a point where, it starts feeling better. Structure versus a relationship is another one we think about. I don't think people change outside of relationships. It's one of the reasons I ask a lot of parents to be part of this program. You are the most important relationships in their lives. For our sake, what that means is that we hope they connect with one of us. Like Lainey was doing a check-in, a young person has connected with Lainey. Incredibly enough, that makes the rest of us a little more okay, right? And so that's when we think about relationship. On the other hand, sometimes they lean into their like teen relationships and they're trying to get their kudos and everything from each other. And in group, that can look like cliques or other things. And if any group of them starts interfering with group, we throw in more structure. All right. And structure for us means they might come in and have a seating chart. We don't do it very often, and it doesn't take very long because pretty quickly they understand we want everybody to move forward. But you guys can think about your own lives. I mean, you're talking like, you know, when Nathan is struggling, you put some more structure, like it's not safe, right? And you worry about that. And we all do that. We put some more structure on them. And so it's finding the way to walk that middle path. The last one, and some of you, and Lindsay, you hit on this one really well when you were explaining what was going on with Caitlin, is uncertainty versus control. So I started this work, and way more young people than should have were in that, like, what's the purpose of life? Why bother? Those kind of things. And so, you know, I kind of did my dive into philosophy at that point and came up with this uncertainty versus control. And you can just look at, like, young people, like, when they feel uncertain, this actually goes for us as adults too, but when we feel uncertain, we want to take more control over things. And that can turn into, like, controlling what they eat, controlling their exercise, controlling who gets to talk to them. What does a hoodie up mean? It means I want less people to be able to get to me. When I isolate in my bedroom, what am I doing? I'm saying they're going to have to come through my door to communicate with me, right? And, you know, and sadly, suicide is the ultimate in control. I am controlling exactly who gets to interact with me forever, kind of thing. And so we pay a lot of attention to it. I mean, and I loved you even being already able to see that in Caitlin, as she's trying to take more and more control, right? And so we're trying to help them walk that middle path. And I would say uncertainty. I'd also say lack of direction, which is why we talk about values and say, I want to go in this direction. If I want to go in this direction, I can move in that direction, right? And so it's the only one I give you the middle path on. I think it's wonder. I think it's faith in something. I think it's a direction or a purpose in their life. And so when I was doing this work and learning this stuff, my wife and I were talking about vacation. I'm like, we're going to the Grand Canyon. And then, like, why? Because I want my kids to have that 30 seconds of just awe. The world is bigger than me. Because when you're trying to control things, your world just keeps getting smaller and smaller. So with that, there's another dialectic is that the biology plays a part and the environment plays a part. And at the end of the day, I can't tell them apart, right? I can't be at a point where I'm like, you know, this Hudson's issues are 85% Justin's genetics. Like, you know, like, I can't tell that. I can't see it on the outside. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me because the person I'm working with is the one that's in front of me, and I'm going to figure that out. But we do have to think about, there's highly likely they've been handed, you know, some biological predispositions to anxiety and depression and another thing. And quite frankly, huge intelligence is not always an advantage in this world, right? It's an emotional vulnerability. All right. Our fight and flight system is in there. And sleep deprivation, these biological things. I have actually said for years, I think I would have 20% less work if teens just slept on a normal path, right? I literally think 20% of them would just be healthier if they slept better, right? And then the social environment, all right? Invalidation is a huge deal. And they get it. Sometimes we don't even know we're being invalidating as parents. Sometimes they just get it from school. Sometimes it's like nobody's even trying to be invalidating, but the world is invalidating. I would even argue, and Nathan say, you know, physical illness are like making him feel like he's not worth it, right? It's invalidating him that his body does not work the same way other people's bodies work, right? We learn from others, and then there's always this transactional loop, you know, and that you guys are the most important piece on that. And we talk about invalidation a lot, but we all learn from kind of an iteration process back and forth. And, you know, you guys, in the way you described it, Hudson has learned from sisters being sisters that maybe I shouldn't get my voice out there a whole lot, right? That's just a transactional thing. Doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just, you've probably raised some strong girls, right? and it's hard to be a male in this day and age. much less a young man. And so, especially with sisters, I have 3 sisters, so I understand. Right. And we do want to hit on, because we do this whole invalidating environment. There's another family day on it, but it is an important concept. And one of the things we've learned is that things that were actually validating between like 6 and 10 or 6 and 11, like you say them now when they're older, and it becomes invalidating. So it's crazy. Like you're doing exactly what you used to do that used to work, and now it's invalidating. And so it's one of those reasons, like, I'm like, parenting is hard. And so what we're trying to figure out is how to parent this particular kid that's in front of us right now. Not 2-3 months ago, because that kid was different to parent, right? How do we figure out how to parent this kid right here? And so, you know, invalidation literally means that they get made to feel unworthy just because they're sharing a feeling or an emotion or something like that. And so for her to be as happy with you with all the crying you've just talked about means you have found a way to validate that emotion. Doesn't make it productive in the world just yet, right? Right? But that's half the battle, is the validation part. Because if you're invalidating, then I have a kid who's sitting on that edge of the couch from you, and I see that regularly, right? And it's always going back and forth. So we spend energy on this. We actually asked you to look at it. I was super impressed. Justin's already done this paid practice that only parents can start to look at your relationship with your own young person. So that's all a part of this whole validation, invalidation thing. This is just what the literature says. Each of your young people need to do this. They've got to find a way to establish an identity. And that, again, just to go, it is hard with 3 strong sisters. It's also hard when you go from I'm big man on campus to a huge ocean, right? And like, I don't know who I am in this ocean. And that's every 8th grader that goes into high school, but some of them have different pathways through, right? But it does make it hard to have an identity. They're trying to establish independence and autonomy. They are practicing intimacy and closeness in relationships. And quite frankly, my biggest problems with technology is that I think young people are practicing intimacy and closeness. They think they're practicing that on their phone through texts and through social media and those kind of things. Maybe someday that it will be proven to me that that is an effective way to learn how to be in relationships. I do not believe that right now. Right. And so when you're not interacting with people all the time, you're not growing in that area. They do have developing and changing bodies, and they don't know what to do with it. And our young people no longer accept the stereotype of awkward adolescent, right? Like, we just talked about it. Like, we're going to be awkward here. This guy shot up 2 inches and now, his knees hurt and he can't jump. Right? Like, just weird. They go looking up things right now, and they find out, well, what could this mean? Well, it could mean all kinds of things, and then their brains are working faster. So sadly enough, that just means if they've got a negative thought, it can come up faster. It does lead to, and I don't spend a whole lot of time here because you guys all recognize it's challenging to be a parent when your young person is struggling. And these are some of those areas that, are you being too lenient? Are you being too strict? It's super hard to know where you're at on that. So part of our family days is just, how do we have these discussions that help us to know how to parent this particular kid? And with that, it leads us to what I would say is the most important dialectic in DBT, and that's acceptance and change. And so this is one of those where if you go to acceptance of itself is a good thing. We should all be accepting people. But if you go to the extreme, what does that look like? So I think about myself. You guys can all see the Steelers bills on here. My happy place is sitting on a couch watching the Steelers win with a bowl of cereal in my hand, right? That's my happy place. If I could accept myself like 100% right there, well, A, I'm going to be huge. B, I'm not going to be providing for my family. There are actually other things I enjoy in the world other than the Steelers winning. But that's what that would be. Well, so what's the extreme of change? What does that look like? Well, You think of a young man or young person who just, threw a one hitter, right? Team won, everybody's cheering them. Somebody comes up to them, and usually it's trying to be helpful, but if you just thrown a knuckleball right there, right? If you'd just done something a little bit different, like it would have been perfect. Like somehow perfect is the goal, right? I promise you, every one of your young people already have the thought, I'm not good enough. The second any one of us has the thought, I'm not good enough, we think we need to change. Our bodies cannot physically sustain 24/7 sense of needing to change. We just can't handle. We don't have the energy for that. It's why a kid's exhausted getting ready for school. Looks like everybody else got here just fine. Well, they're exhausted because they've been thinking about it for 3 hours trying to get ready, kind of. So our goal with your young people is to be like, can you accept whatever it is, whatever medical situations came up, whatever brought me to this point? Can I accept this is who I am today? And can I use a skill and change and make tomorrow a little bit better? That makes sense to everybody? I'm going to say exactly the same thing to each and every one of you, right? Can you accept that you've just figured this out in the last month and didn't know Hudson was struggling? Whether he was struggling or not, we don't even know. But can you accept that? And can you say, I want to figure out how to parent this kid in front of me right now to help them move to whatever they need to be? Does that make sense? And that's all of it, right? Whatever has gone on in the past, we've got divorces, we've got all kinds of situations that are uncertain to kids, right? And can we accept that? And can we learn some skills, learn how to parent this particular kid in front of us? No. See, if I don't let you ask questions, I get to feel like just an incredible expert. Who said that? Amber. Okay.
No, just, I think it was around in January. We had this really few good weeks between his diagnosis and him getting sick again and everything. There were a few days where he went back to school and was there all day and everything. And I actually just said to him, you should be so proud of yourself. Like, you win and you did it. And it was hard, but you made it through. And he said, I shouldn't be proud of myself because everyone else does this every day. Like, it's not hard for everyone else. So I shouldn't be proud of myself. I don't know what to say other than, you've had a different situation, but you've had different for the last several months. I mean, he's shot right back. I shouldn't be. And I know it sounds ridiculous. For 13 years he's gone to school. This is a big issue. But I was trying to.
Yeah.
And not even saying I'm proud of you, but saying you should be proud of yourself for doing this.
Right, he's beating himself up from the inside, and he's good at it because he's really smart. And you tried from a great heart place, and he told you exactly what his advisor was thinking about, right? And so I don't have a good answer for you. I do know here's how I deal and have dealt with like haircuts. I'm going to use a very simple example, but people get their haircut. I ask, do you like your haircut? I notice you got a haircut, so I keep it really, neutral, non-judgmental. And if they say, yeah, I like it, it's awesome, it's great hair. If they say, no, I'm not a big fan, I'm like, oh, yep, I noticed you got your haircut, right? And I think you're going to have to move somewhere close to that with him. And one of the reasons we talk about values a lot, and I work with my interns, and it's a technique called motivational interviewing. And it's like, what's the discrepancy between what you want and where you're at? And so in that situation, if you were to ever have to replay it kind of thing, it's like, hey, what do you think about what you're doing? And so it's a question, right? Or how are you getting to school? That kind of thing. And then it's like, okay, I can tell, but validating his value. Oh, I can tell you are trying hard to get to school right now, right? And that's a different validation point than even saying you should be proud of yourself, because he's rejecting that. He was able to accept your compliments, but even that, but then when you tell me that story, he couldn't accept that you saw and were proud of him because of this, because he thought he was still failing. Like these were abnormal things. And I'm going to go right into there about my next slide is how that self-abusing advisor develops itself. And we're going to hit on that. And it's why I asked the question, and Nathan did a nice job of, yeah, of course I can accept these compliments. On the other hand, you had Caitlin who was, I don't think so. Right. And I think that's real. Right. And so let me walk through that. And yes, you guys are welcome to ask questions anytime. The goal is for you. This is what I think is important. What's important here is for you to leave with what you need from it. But I'm going to walk through the self-abusing advisor, because I think this is I don't know, I've been working with teens for 35 years now, and this is still one of the most important concepts I've ever come across, is this inner voice, and that it can get to beating themselves up on the inside. And so it starts with a challenge or an inability to regulate emotions, all right? And that can be biological. They can be born with a predisposition towards something. It can be environmental, and some of you have already mentioned COVID. COVID was like a environmental level that interfered with people developing emotions or being able to regulate their emotions. Because you think about it, in you guys sharing how those things landed together on Hudson's life, but he literally, he needed to go every single day just to build up the strength and the endurance to make it to the next day. And then whenever there was a block, and COVID was like this happy place for a lot of people for a whole year. And it turns out when they had to go back, they hadn't developed the strength and the tools and everything else you would have developed in that year of just continuing to show up. All right. And it can be trauma based. And trauma could be your typical, your neglect, your physical, your sexual, those kind of traumas. But it can also be, we've seen in here, we had a young man came into us at 17, 18, about where Nathan is. And everyone would say at 16, he was a golden boy. 3-sport athlete, super smart, tons of friends. Nobody would have even suggested there was a mental health issue. Came to us, he was severely depressed. And what had happened is in a span of 14 months, he'd had 3 concussions in the sports he played. And he was severely depressed. And the same exact pattern applied to his life. So walk you through this. Somebody doesn't talk to them or rejects them. All right. This is not bullying, although bullying is an extreme of it. This is a young person, like, they're over there playing, and I would like to be playing with them, and they didn't invite me. They don't even know you wanted to be playing with them, right? And they still didn't invite me. In his case, he was literally invited. He could come to games. He could be on the team bus, these things, and he still felt rejected because he couldn't play, right? And so it's a kid that, from everything I could tell, the coaches tried, his friends tried, but he felt rejected in that situation. He became discouraged. All right. And so the discouragement becomes this I don't fit in thought. And it gets repeated by that advisor voice. And the advisor voice develops between ages 2 and 5. As soon as you learn language, you have an advisor voice. All right. I don't fit in thought gets repeated by that advisor voice. If I don't fit in becomes something must be wrong with me. And you'll see the next line is something is wrong with me. And the difference I see that a young person, the something must be wrong with me. They're saying, man, if I could join a different baseball team, I'm going to fit in there. If I could join a different dance team, I could fit in there. Or if I could go to a different school, I'm going to fit in there. So that kid who's asking for stuff, there's still some hope. Right? They still believe that there's something that they could change. But eventually, and for all my kidding about adolescent logic, eventually they're like, well, I don't fit in here. And I don't fit in there. And I don't fit in here or here. What's the common denominator? I'm the common denominator. Right? And that's when it becomes something is wrong with me. All right? And this is, they all get this concept because of the Inside Out movies. Like they all understand this is a core memory, a core part of me. And sadly, that can get repeated for years without us having any indication whatsoever that it's going on inside of their head, right? And we just can't see it. So something is wrong with me always becomes I'm a bad person. I've not seen it go the other way. If I'm a bad person, I can't be loved, cared for. If I can't be loved, I'm not worthy and I have no value. I may as well end everyone's pain by not being alive. And I'm in awe at how many young people think they're doing you a favor when they consider not being alive. You know, they think they're a burden and they think they're going to make your lives easier when they get to that place because it's the only option they can see. Anywhere on this page, you are dealing with a self-abusing advisor. They are beating themselves up from the inside. That makes sense to everybody, and it is influencing. And so a different place with Nathan and that same comment may not have meant anything, right? Mom's proud of me. Great, right? It should just happen that way. But when they're in this place of beating themselves up from the inside, and the reason I ask about compliments is I've actually seen a young person who couldn't take at all a compliment. We had to build an exposure plan that literally included the parents taking and putting like 3 compliments on the fridge, and that the young person got to decide whether they were walking by the fridge and seeing them or not. That was the exposure to begin with. That young person just finished their first year of pharmacology school, and I just got a text from the family that they are doing great right now, like as a family, and there was a lot of other invalidating things, So, like, all of that is to say, I have seen your young people before, and we believe what we do is helpful. So with that, and I talk about hope a lot, and I also teach. I teach on the DMV. I just got a new car, so I'm thinking about DMV. But what is it? What am I trying to say? DSM. The DSM. The criteria for anxiety and depression. I teach other clinicians that, and I cannot take the criteria from anxiety and depression and add it up to see the hopelessness that I see in young people this day, just kind of across the board and in our room on a regular basis. This quote made a lot more sense to me. Hope without direction can all too easily turn into despair. When I think about that young man who, again, golden boy, 3-sport athlete, soon as those pieces were taken away from him, he fell into extreme depression and hopelessness, right? It was turning into despair. We spent most of our energy helping him find some other things to have purpose in life, the values, and changing that. When he wasn't supposed to have to do that until he was 18, out of high school, or had to commit, kind of thing. So this quote makes a ton more sense to me. It does lead into what does hope mean? All right. There's a spiritual faith-based hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel kind of hope, like I can make it if I can just get through this semester, if I can just get through these next 2 weeks, those kind of things. When I say hope, or when our program talks about hope, it's from the grit literature. And that's Angela Duckworth's work. And I believe I can make tomorrow better than today. All right. And so I'm going to give you a real concrete example. We have and to warn you not to hit it, but you leave our driveway, there's a big hole on the side right there, right? And I turned that too sharply one day and I hit it and popped my tire, just destroyed it, right? That can ruin a day. Like I'm going somewhere and now I can't go, right? And so it could make that a really rotten day. I know how to get a tire fixed. Blessed that I have the resources to get that done, right? So I knew for a fact, no matter how bad this was in the moment, I could make tomorrow better than today. Does that make sense to everybody? So when we're trying to teach your young people skills, it's to give them control in a healthy way, going back to your list. But if I can use a skill, I believe I can make tomorrow better than today, instead of trying to make a checklist that's going to frustrate you, because it never goes that way. Never, right? So that's hope. So what do we think we're working on? We are, from the very beginning, we want to help them cope with symptoms, because depression and anxiety symptoms are real. Hearts are beating faster, palms are sweaty. There are real physical sensations, real emotional things. So we're trying to cope with symptoms. We're trying to cope with what they think about themselves. And we're going to try and help them find direction toward things that matter to them. And that, in our language, is called strengthening the valuer, because I think all 3 of those impact every domain of all of our lives. So we do, if you didn't pay attention to what your kid was filling out, it was willingness, self-compassion, hope, and inflexibility. And when they got in their room, we did on day one a depression and an anxiety scale. And so from day one through a 5-week, all this data is from a 5-week program because we've just switched in the last 6 months to a 6-week program. But all that is from day one to the end of week 5 or end of day 4 in week 5. And we don't we don't seem to damage willingness to believe change can happen. I just did a training on Friday with a bunch of clinicians, and all of them would admit that willingness gets hit when a kid goes to a hospital or when they don't get effective treatment, those kind of things. They just don't believe things are going to work next time. They increase the self-compassion. We increase hope. Inflexibility is scored in the negative, so that actually means young people leave here flexible. And we have a significant impact on depression and anxiety just in 5 weeks. So with that, always open to questions, but I want to give you guys some tools to go home with and start working on that. Does anybody have any questions right now? We're moving along at a good pace today. Nope. Okay. If you guys would turn to page, I don't know, I'm going to go with 3. I should write that somewhere. 3. We do take this advisor very, very seriously, and lots of what we do are to try and get a young person to unhook from that. And it says page 3 on the bottom. So you go back 1 page there, Justin, or Palanca letters right there. Yeah. I want you to look at that. Palanca encouragement and gratefulness letters. And so we'd love for you to gather up 4 or 6, find 4 to 6 meaningful adults, older siblings, aunts, uncles, whatever, including yourselves, but to write your young person a Palanca letter, an encouragement letter, a gratefulness letter. There are some examples on that link. It's really just to say how amazing they are. And what we'd love to have you do is to collect 4, 6, as many as you can get your hands on all at one time, and hand them to them and ask them to try and read them all at once. I know of scenarios where the young person could not read them all at once. It's just too overwhelming. But my goal in that is to just overwhelm that self-abusing advisor with positivity for like 15 minutes and leave them something in their hands that they can go back to and read. Does that make sense to everybody? I will say this is the only time you'll ever hear us talk about it. I'm not going to set up a situation where young people think they're going to get encouragement or something like that, and know for a fact in my own life, 6 weeks can go by without me having time to make this happen, right? It can just happen. All of our lives are busy, but if you can make it happen anytime, we have seen it be incredibly meaningful to the young people. So that is Palanca letters. And if you ask anybody on the team, they'll say just give it to them on the way home from family day, give it to them Sunday afternoon, something like that. So anybody on the team can help with that. The QR code on the screen, the QR code on the front of your packet, all goes to boldparenting.online. Couple things there. I just this year recognized, like every sports team my child is on has a syncable calendar, and I'm like, I can do this. And so if you want to go there, you'll know what lesson we're teaching that day. You'll have a video somewhere between 2 and 6 minutes of like the major concept we were teaching. Obviously, we take 3 hours. We teach it in lots of different ways, but you can track and find out. So if you're like, oh, I just learned about radical acceptance myself. Did you guys talked about that today, right? That kind of thing. So that's on the calendar. You can go, I was doing this before everybody just took pictures and sent pictures of things to people, but you can get a copy of this. You can download a PDF of the Palanca letter thing, and you can find the validation and trust paid practice. So on their list, the young people cannot access the validation and trust paid practice. Only you as parents can get that paid practice and share it with them. And that one of our days is called validation and trust. So there's a whole lesson on it. This is like part 2 of you evaluating your actual relationship with your young person, and then them evaluating it, and then talking about trust. Because I hear your story, I'm like, yes, when a young person has done scary stuff, we've got PTSD, we're worried about it, right? Which impacts trust. And, you know, how do we rebuild that trust? And so that whole lesson, that paid practice, tries to move you in that direction, that rebuilding trust. The other thing that we have found to be true is that when a young person is struggling, it is hard to have meaningful conversations, right? Because you end up like, you talk about the value of going to school a lot, right? It's a meaningful conversation. They're just not in a place to have that be a meaningful conversation, right? Sometimes it's, you know, we want to talk about curfews after they've broken it, right? Somebody's already in that red zone at that place. And so I want to give you a tool to just work on kind of getting to know your young person again. Okay. Yeah. And so these are just conversation. They're just questions that don't have right answers. Like my favorite one, especially since we got 2 boys in this group, is that, you know, you might ask a young man, what makes a good life? They'd be like, well, if you'll feed me for the rest of it and let me play in the basement on video games, that sounds like a pretty good life to me, right? It's a conversation because you get to share what makes a good life to you. And, you know, and differently than, because I love, you know, would you rather or other table topics things, these are all actually, they go with the value or domains. With all those values, they kind of, you'll see funky letters on your cards like VPD. So that question kind of helps them think about valuing in the presence of difficulty. All right. So these cards are specifically designed to strengthen the value versus a would you rather or a fun conversation card. So they're also helpful to just, your kids are changing, right? They're different than they were a year ago, and they keep changing through adolescence, and it helps you get to know them. A lot of families use them around the dinner table and just have everybody answer them, make it a part of the way things are. I keep a set in my car. I have a 15-year-old. I keep wanting to say 14. I think I got stuck there, but she's 15 now. And we had our struggle period at 11, right? This is when the hoodie was up, didn't want to talk to us, was rebelling against all family values of whatever kind. And it was also at that same time where she wanted to sit in the front seat, right? And that shifting period. I'm like, all right, if you're going to sit in the front seat, guess what you're doing? You're answering a question card with me. We did it enough that it became a pattern. And even on that day when that hoodie was up and that face was against the window and she didn't want to communicate with anyone in the world, I got 3 minutes when I pulled out the card, right? And then she started using them with her friends. She now carries a set with her to high school and like has her table answer and ask them. So it's meant to be kind of a pattern to start that conversation pattern kind of off. Last thing you see on my list is reauths and ROIs. So reauthorization is just a crazy insurance thing that even though I have a contract with them that says we're a yada yada 6-week program, we do this many sessions, they still periodically make me prove that it's both needed and that we're being useful. How we handle that, if that question comes up, and it's not everybody all the time, but on Wednesdays when you come in, there'll be a clipboard waiting for you. You grab that and you fill out the front and back of that. We have everything we need to talk to your insurance company if we have to. It's also a good way to communicate with the team if we need to know something and for some reason you don't have a chance to talk to a clinician, or you will all have one of our clinicians as your primary contact and they'll reach out this week or next. But that sheet's also very good at that. ROIs are not return on investment. They are releases of information. And if you want us to talk to anybody or communicate anything with anybody other than yourselves, we have to have a signed ROI. If you've signed them and given us permission, what we give them is the treatment plan, which you guys, I think, will see Wednesday. I think they're ready to go this week already. The midterm, evaluation, how we think progress is going, in the discharge summary. Even if you've given us permission to talk to your school, I'm not calling your counselor. I'm not calling your schools just randomly. But if you ask me to call your counselor and I have an ROI, it just makes it easier. Or if you say call Jason and your counselor calls me and I have an ROI, then I can talk to them. That kind of thing. So that's ROIs. They're not required in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to do that, you can sign those, and that's what we do. We are literally on my last slide, so that is all. Talked very fast. I got done a little early today. Does anybody have any questions, or even it specifically applying this to your child? I appreciate y'all, considering us and honoring us with your child, trusting us in that, and